Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Game In podcast. Today, we're doing another fun game club episode. We're going to be talking about Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail. Now that 7.3 has happened, we can kind of take a somewhat holistic view of this expansion narratively. And while there's a little bit more to come, both from a gameplay standpoint and things like the raids, we felt like now was probably a decent time to go ahead and tackle our thoughts on this and share this. As always, I'm your host, Blitzermaru, and I've got my co-host, Jim LC, with me, and we're really excited to talk about this. But before we dive into everything, you're always asking me this question. This time I'm going to start by asking you, how you been, man? How you doing?
Oh man, it's been good. A lot has happened since the last time we recorded an episode, which was a month ago.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's a month ago.
maybe a little more.
Um, a little bit, yeah, a little bit more. I know I joked about this in the last podcast about how this has become a monthly podcast, but pretty much is. But we've all been doing other things. This I promise you, this wasn't on purpose. Okay,
Yeah,
this wasn't on purpose. Um, both Blitz and I have been busy. Um, we've actually been out and about, just doing other things besides playing video games. Blitz will go into what he's been doing as of late. But yeah, been doing good. I finally most recently been playing Final Fantasy Tactics. That was pretty good. Hades 2, that was interesting. I did a replay of Halo Reach recently,
ooh,
just out of just out of the blue, and I was like, you know what sounds fun? Play it on my Steam Deck while I'm just like bored out of my mind right now. I'll just play Halo Reach. I haven't played that in maybe 12, 13 years or something like that. It's been a while. Um, so yeah, and then I also went to PAX West most recently.
okay.
Yeah, I only made it to Sunday. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it on Saturday. I made it to Sunday. I couldn't make it on Saturday, which is where the Expedition 33 panel took place. I don't know if you saw the panel or not, but there was like a bunch of people out there with the baguette
Oh
cosplay
yeah,
on. Um,
yeah.
I th- y-
I actually got not an argument, but a discussion with a friend about that on stream when I was doing Expedition 33 because I had actually said I was wishing that I saw more cosplays of like the actual Expeditioner gear, but it was probably like a little soon in the game's life cycle, and the baguette cosplay was just like so easy to put together that
oh
so many
yeah,
people did. Um,
yeah.
and he was like, "Oh man, no, they're out there. You're not looking hard enough. There's tons of people doing the Expeditioner cosplay." Um, but uh, but yeah, no, I remember seeing the baguette cosplay everywhere over the summer.
Yeah, no, it's a okay. Admittedly, I'm one of those people too. I don't really cosplay, but if I were to do that, I would have probably done that because how easy and probably really cheap it is, right?
Yeah,
Um, you go to, freaking a Ross or something and probably pick something
yeah,
else, something similar to that up, right? Um, so yeah, I did that. I'll also probably put in right here, note to the editor, which is me, to put in there was a dog that went in as a into that panel, right? And he dressed up as a baguette. There was a baguette dog and everything. So I'll put that in here. I'm just putting this in for the notes for me so I can put that in there.
nice.
um, but yeah, also went to on Sunday, was the Naoki Yoshida and Minagawa panel on art design and game design and how they intertwine with each other, right? So I thought that was very interesting. It was originally supposed to be, you know, like this is the Final Fantasy Tactics panel. Essentially, that's what it was, right? Because Minagawa was there and he's
Yeah,
the art director and of Final Fantasy Tactics. And But they both have hands in Final Fantasy 14 too, so it was kind of like a mix of both. It was a very interesting panel. If you guys ever want to see that, I think there's a lot of interesting insight on game design just in general and art design. So you can find it on YouTube somewhere. And yeah, other than that, um, that has been pretty much it. How have you been? You've been pretty busy yourself recently too.
Yeah, so I've been kind of all over the place. I feel like I haven't gotten to play nearly as many games as I've wanted to. Like I have stuff installed on my PlayStation and I'm watching like the backlog start to grow of stuff that it's all like, man, do I want to stream this? Do I want to just sit down and play this? Um, and I just need to actually pull the trigger on playing some games. But outside of gaming, uh, right after we finished filming the last podcast, I went on a trip to Japan. Wasn't my first trip. I've probably mentioned this on the podcast before, but for those who don't know, I go almost every year. I've been lucky and fortunate enough to be able to do that. But it was the first time for a friend of mine, and so it was really fun to take her around and let her experience it for the first time and see her get excited about things that like I've started to just take for granted. Um, but one of the things that I was really stoked to do during this trip that I normally can't because I usually go around cherry blossom season and they don't do events like this because everybody's out seeing cherry blossoms. I got to go to the near 15th anniversary exhibition, and that was like, for me, as near being my favorite gaming franchise, was just a magical thing. They had rooms set up for each of the games. They had a whole room dedicated to the stage plays. And for near fans will understand this, the last room of the exhibition was just a room filled with lunar tears, which is like this really important flower in the game. And they were playing like uh, this song from the soundtrack, Kaine Salvation. Um, and they had like quotes on the wall. And I'll admit, I cried for like 5 minutes just standing in that room. Uh, and I definitely know there were people who walked through and were all like, "Man, who's this random white guy in Japan just crying in this room of flowers?" But um, it was awesome, and it was definitely the highlight of the trip for me. Uh, and then got home and have been doing all sorts of stuff. Uh, I said that I haven't played as many games as I've wanted to play, but a few that I have gotten to, we've been digging into Silent Hill F on stream, and I'm a huge Fatal Frame fan, uh, which I suspect that the F in Silent Hill F stands for Fatal Frame, um, as like a tribute because the game feels super Fatal Framey like narratively, but like from a combat perspective and an exploration perspective, it feels like Silent Hill. So it kind of feels like a marriage of those two franchises. Um, and I know it's been super divisive among the fan base, but I've personally enjoyed it. And then another game that I recently played, and it was short, beat it in a single night, was Sword of the Sea. If you're aware of that one, it's from Giant Squid Games, I think is the studio, which is like their developers that broke off from that game company, the guys who made like Journey and Sky Children
Mhm.
of Light and stuff. Um, and Sword of the Sea really feels kind of like a spiritual successor to Journey in a lot of ways. So very beautiful art design, music design. The story is told through a lot of visuals. Um, and that was a blast. Uh, and surprisingly, the game that we're going to be talking about today, Final Fantasy XIV, I haven't gotten to log on to a whole ton. In fact, the first time I logged on in like 2 months was last night
Was
to
last
play
night.
with
Yeah.
you and kind of talk about it and review it a bit. Um, but with playing Final Fantasy XIV a lot recently, and I think we'll start or not playing it a lot recently, and I think we'll get into discussing it. I think for me, uh, this this expansion has been interesting because I haven't experienced it as socially as I have past
Hmm.
expansions. Which I mean, obviously you're aware of because we used to be in the same FC and we used to get on and we talked and hung out pretty frequently through the game. But I think not having the social aspect for me has definitely changed the way I viewed this expansion, and I kind of focused a lot more on like the story and the gameplay and kind of the structure of it. If I had to give it a rating, for me, Dawntrail would probably be, uh, and this is post 7.3, kind of seeing the whole thing, probably like a 7.5 out of 10. And for me, it's probably my third favorite expansion. Um, it's behind Shadowbringers and Endwalker.
Hmm.
But I think for me it beats out ARR Stormblood Heaven's Ward.
Really? Hmm.
And I think it's carried uh a lot by the gameplay, the dungeons
Hmm.
and the raids. Um, but also I did enjoy the story quite a bit, and we'll get into that. But that's where it sits for me. How about you? How did you feel about Dawn Trail on the
So
whole?
okay, I'm gonna take this as a preface. I like Dawn Trail as a whole. I'm not gonna be generous though and give it a high rating.
Okay.
That's just me. So I'm giving it a 6. Now, mind you, I'm gonna be IGN here where it's like a 6 out of 10 is not bad. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's I play it almost like every day. So but for me it was a 6 out of 10. Um while this, obviously I have to deduct points for some of the story aspects and stuff like that. There was a couple things here and there. Now, okay, I have to also preference this. I'm only grading just 7.0 as a 6 out of 10.
Okay.
I don't think it's fair for me to rate post patch or post expansion patches, right? For me, at least, because right now the post expansion patches for me are 10 times better
Okay.
than the base expansion, right? Um, and it was the same way in Stormblood. A lot of people like to make the Stormblood comparisons, where people didn't really initially like the base Stormblood expansion, right?
Yeah.
But once the patches came through, there was a shift in opinion, right?
Yeah.
I thought that I also had the same sentiment when I was playing through it. Was that did I hate it? No. Did I like it? Eh, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of where I stand, right? Um, I do share that sentiment with you where I think uh the the game design aspects of Dawntrail heavily carry this expansion because I think this is probably the best expansion for battle content just in general. And I don't know if you agree with me there, but just
So
in terms of the stuff that we're getting new content wise, I think it has been pretty good. Like
yeah.
raids have been raids have actually genuinely, even on normal, like tripped me up a couple times, and that hasn't happened in a while, right?
So I
So
I would agree um that like I the one for me that's better is Stormblood. And I'll get into this as to like why I think that is. I think if the third alliance raid and the final raids like maintain the quality that Dawntrail has had, it will surpass Stormblood for me. Um,
mhm,
but yeah, like at the moment it's fairly dead even, and I'd agree with you on that. Like from a battle content perspective, uh, I don't think it's ever been better than what
yeah,
we have now. And I know
mhm,
that's a hot take for a lot of people. A lot of people
right,
think that this expansion's been too hard. And I think as a longtime player, the casual content finally doesn't feel mind numbing to go through.
right,
Like I don't dread doing dailies as much as I
mhm,
once did. I say that having not logged on a ton and not done a ton of dailies, but
right.
um
So I want to add this too. It's overall. the content isn't difficult if you keep, I mean, as much of everything in life, right? If you keep doing it over and over again, it's going to be the same thing, and it's not going to be, you're going to learn, right?
Yeah.
And you get better and better each time. Um, for me, the battle content, going the first time through, for the past two expansions, and this is just normal raids. I'm just talking about this in just casual context, right? So normal raids, normal trials, normal dungeons, right? Um, is that there are a couple things where it's like, oh, that was really cool, right? I've never, I really like that mechanic. Well, we were playing yesterday, and in the 7.3 dungeon, right, where they split up everybody into four different individual groups, right, where you had
Yeah, for the
the tank.
boss.
So I thought that was pretty cool. Just a little bit spicing it up from that package of the dungeon, right? Because that's what the development team does, is that they split up everything into packages, right? Where they know you can finish this. Hey, you're probably gonna finish this dungeon in 15, 20 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But it's usually the same exact kind of layout where, at least in Stormblood, even a little bit in Heaven's Ward, right? Where it's like you do 2 packs to the wall, boss, 2 packs to the wall, boss, 2 packs to the wall, final boss, right?
Yeah.
While that core package has remained the same, there are things here and there that have kind of you know, made things interesting in the battle content, right? Like for example, new mechanics and stuff. So that is always welcome to see, especially for trials. There was a lot of full mechanics in the raids, the alliance raids. I think I've had a lot of fun with, because I can't just go in, and be like, oh, like first time, like I know what that's gonna do,
Yeah.
right? And I've noticed that there are some encounters where it's like, okay, the first encounter of a trial, it's always gonna be a raid wide AOE, right?
Yeah.
Or it's gonna be always gonna be a raid wide, and it's like, okay, I'm just gonna reprisal this. But sometimes I forgot what the encounter was. It didn't happen, then it caught me off guard, and I was like, whoa, like I'm not used to, because I was so used to just doing autopilot, and that's kind of how it felt for the past 4 years, right?
Yeah.
Where the bosses have been kind of relatively not the same. I wouldn't compare it to say that's the same, right? But they have the same tendencies, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and there's a couple things that I'd say. And so for a very long time, um there was kind of a consistent level of difficulty amongst like normal level content. And every once in a while there would be something that was, it was just challenging in a certain way, to the point that it would catch people off guard. And the example I always give is the final dungeon of Shadowbringers right before Endwalker came out. The final boss of that dungeon was Lunar Bahamut.
Hmm.
And I remember the discussion around that dungeon because Lunar Bahamut was so insanely more difficult than like every dungeon boss before it. Like it would wipe parties, um, because he just moved faster. That was like the only thing, was like he did like room wide attacks that would just move faster. Um, but like, and there's a couple dungeons here and there where there's situations like that in the past. I feel like Dawntrail was more difficult, but it was consistent in the fact that it was more difficult. It wasn't like you were in a dungeon and then bam, okay, why is this boss so much more difficult than the rest of the
Right. There wasn't
expansion?
any spikes, right?
Yeah,
Hmm.
it was like, no, we ramped up the difficulty, but we kind of kept it ramped up. And I agree with you that I think they did it through new mechanics. Um, and this is why I reference it against Stormblood, and kind of Stormblood being my favorite battle expansion. If you haven't played the game since Realm Reborn, a lot of people don't know this, and I talk about this all the time, and a lot of my FF14 friends are sick of me for bringing it up. But when Stormblood came out, there was a huge overhaul in the battle system. And if you weren't around for the launch of Stormblood, you truly can't comprehend how big of an overhaul this was. We've never had anything like it since. Um, but right now, every character has HP and MP. There used to be a third bar called technical points, and everything you did costed technical points, even sprinting costed technical points. So if you were a physical class, you use technical points for everything. Um, if you were a caster, you use technical points for nothing. Everything was MP based. So casters could sit there and dance around the room, and tanks had to stay right in front of an enemy. Physical DPS had to stay right in front of an enemy. Uh, and it affected the game design. It affected the way they would do AoEs and stuff like that because movement was so limited. And so when they got rid of technical points in Stormblood, that's why Stormblood feels so different, because they could design battles differently,
Hmm.
because they sped everything up. And when you go into the raids of Stormblood, particularly the Ivalice raids, you see all these really interesting mechanics that you never really see anywhere else in the game. Think like the Thunder God and his ring, and like having to move around in unison,
Right.
or like
Hmm.
the sharpshooter guy where you all have to turn a certain way. Um, and Dawntrail has felt like a bit of a revival of that to me, of this idea of, even though they didn't overhaul the battle system, they said, hey, what if we went back to that Stormblood idea of, let's just throw new stuff at the wall that we've never done before, and
Right. Hmm.
just design battles around it. And we got stuff like Dancing Green out of that. We've gotten stuff, and a little bit of this came in variant dungeons in Endwalker, but what I call the splatter attacks,
Hmm.
where it's like there's 40 small dot AoEs that are going to go out in a weird succession. Um, the dungeon we did last night with the people running and the two lasers that shoot,
Hmm.
that are like this giant whole room cleave that you have to move into like a specific spot. Uh, I feel like that kind of game design, where it's like, no, we're going to throw new stuff at you in almost every dungeon, rather than the same 10
Right.
mechanics mixed up in a different way.
Right. And I want to add to the battle content stuff because I think the most favorite battle content was probably M2, which was Honeybee Lovely, right?
Oh,
Just
yeah.
because um it was probably the most different raid that I have experienced in a while, right? And what do I mean by that? It doesn't feel like the same Final Fantasy 14. No, Final Fantasy 14 dance that usually all the raids do, right? This is honestly kind of um it felt very different in a way, right? The battle was just amazing. I think all the raids in the AAC cruiserweight, the Vince McMahon story, the
Yeah.
wrestling story, right? Um, is is they're great. It's great battle content, right? I do want to transition to just game design in general, which is where I think the game needs to kind of improve on, in my opinion. And especially we're talking about MSQ, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I want to also add to this point of, and I also want to just kind of add this point. The story, in my opinion, let me just let's kind of back up real quick for because this is important to kind of connect the two, right,
Yeah.
between the story and game design, right? Um, for me, the story, I'm kind of indifferent about. I mean, I'm not gonna. I mean, it was fine. I mean, I enjoyed myself. Will I say it was the best thing since Shadowbringers and Walker Heaven's Ward? No. It was probably on the same level as Stormblood, the base expansion, right? For me, right? And mind you, this was kind of set up that similar way where you had two separate sections, right?
Yeah.
Where you had Tuliolol and then you had Solution 9, kind of like you had that clear, definite split. And you can tell in that clear, definite split, there were two writers, right? And I think there were actually three writers in this expansion the credits rolled. But you can tell that there were different writers for each different block of the expansion.
Yeah.
Um, Compared to in Shadowbringers and Endwalker, where you had Ishikawa doing the bulk of all the expansion stories, right? Um, so with that being said, um, going back to game design, right? And the things that I didn't like, I felt that there was more trivial what is it? Annoying, trivial um things to actually do, right? Compared to other expansions, right? What do I mean by that? Um like fetch quests. We're talking about fetch quests. I remember in early Dawntrail, we were helping Wuklamot do this trial, and then we were just like in like a rice field or whatever. Do you remember that? In
Yeah.
like it was like early level like 90 stuff. I just couldn't. I just couldn't do it. I was like, okay, I need to take a break. And then it was just all that menial school stuff. Or if you compared it to um like let's say Endwalker, there wasn't a lot of like encounters like in Endwalker was, where you had, the encounter where this especially happened right in what's it called Garlemald, right? Where you had the Thancred encounter, right? Where you're going around as Thancred, right? Um or the encounter where Xenos takes over your body, right? Do you remember that? That
Yeah.
was probably
The duties.
one of my favorite duty encounters, right? Solo encounters. In Dawntrail, I felt like there wasn't a lot of that. If there was, I didn't remember any of it, right?
So I I'm actually the opposite when it comes to solo duties. Um, I feel there was a good amount of them. I felt the way they were paced was bad. Because there's like four of them in a row, uh, but they all take place within like 4 hours of each other, if I
Hmm.
remember right. Um, and like you get the Wook Lamont versus gosh, I can't remember his name, the dual-headed guy.
Uh,
Uh Bakul Jaja.
cool, cool, Jaja, yeah. Mm.
The internet's gonna flame me for forgetting him because he was like a fan favorite.
No,
Uh
the cool Jaja, yeah. You're right. You're
um
right.
but yeah, there was that one. There was when you fight the king solo, but there's also you do him as like basically a boss fight with a group of 8.
Hmm.
Um but a lot of those they happen very close together within the story. Um like they happen between like zone 3 and zone 4, kind of all
Right.
all lined up. Uh but because they happen in sequence, you kind of you do forget them, and they do kind of mesh together. Like I agree with you on that, of like the Endwalker ones were so memorable
Hmm.
comparatively. And I think these ones, while they were fun in the moment, if I were to like make a top 10 list, I don't think they come into the discussion
Right.
until
Hmm.
someone's all like, oh well, what about this? And it's like, oh well, actually mechanically it was interesting and it was kind of fun, but it's like, oh no, but the fact that you have to bring it up for me to remember it says something. um
Right.
uh
And I want to touch something too on pacing, right? Because that is exactly the reason why. Um, and the reason why people have been complaining more than they have been in previous expansions about this, right? Especially with fetch quests.
yeah.
Fetch quests have always been a thing, right? But when you have a story, right, where it isn't as, I wouldn't say interesting, but pulls you in as much as it has in the past 4 years, right?
Yeah.
Those start to become more evident as you kind of go along, because it's the mentality of the player, right? Because it's like, oh, I'm not really having a good time playing the story. I'm not really feeling the story. Let's just say, mind you, I didn't really have that kind of feeling, but I still had some contention with
Well,
that, right? But
and
Mhm.
And you said something that I find very important is that fetch quests have always existed.
Mhm.
And that's something that drives me a little nuts when people are like, there's more fetch quests. And I'm like, there's actually not.
Right.
Like if we take Garlemald as the example, from Endwalker, half those quests are, hey, we need you to go find fuel for these lanterns. And hey, these guys don't trust you, so go talk to 5 random people and see what they're saying and regroup, and we'll see what the problems are. Like, structurally, quest design has not changed a whole
Changed.
lot
Mhm. Right.
between ARR and Dawntrail. Like, I'm talking 10 years. That's been the bread and butter of like the structure of quest steps.
Right.
But when you are invested in that story, um,
You
and
care
you're
less about it.
pushing, you care less about it. And I think you're
Mhm.
exactly right on that.
So I think that is why I think a lot of people struggled with this expansion, and they saw a lot of the things that were kind of weren't really weren't really problems before, but because the story wasn't as gravitating to them, right?
Yeah.
Then those issues where it's like, why am I collecting all these, frogs for blah blah blah? I don't know if there's frogs. There probably was frogs or something like
Yeah.
that. But
We've collected frogs before. That's happened.
yeah, but yeah, no, it just becomes more and more of an eyesore because there isn't a nice coat of paint to kind of cover it up,
Yeah.
if that makes sense, right? Um, so going along with that, before we kind of move on, did you have any kind of other thoughts on quest design just in general in Dawn Trail?
So I think the thing about the quest design in Dawntrail and kind of the pacing and stuff like that, uh, you talked about it feeling like Stormblood and kind of these two stories being told at the same time. I actually think it's a bit different than Stormblood, uh, because I think Stormblood tried to tell two stories in tandem. Like, you kind of go back and forth between the two sides. Like, you start in uh kind of the Alamigo stuff, and then you go east and you do the east stuff, and then you come back and you deal with more Alamigo stuff. um Dawntrail, on the other hand, to me, doesn't feel like two stories being told at the same time. It feels more like two expansions being squished into one. Like, you get the whole
Mhm.
Tuli Lolol story, and then you get the whole Solution 9 story. And it's just, they felt fast, and they felt like they almost didn't have enough time to develop uh the way we've gotten in the past. uh
Mhm.
and I think it's a bit of an important distinction, and the reason I say that, because I know you've been kind of focusing towards the base, but when we get into the expansions, I feel like people loved Solution 9 so much more because we had time to talk about it, and we had time to process it, and we had time to think about it. When I think actual like amount of time spent in Solution 9, hour by hour, is probably less than what we spent in Tuliolol and going through that story. Um,
Mhm.
but we did all of Tuliolol on the front end.
Do you want to know the reason why I think that is? Is that it was the fault? I wouldn't call it a fault, but it was a misjudgment on the Endwalker post patch uh, content, right? Because that was the first time ever, right, where you just had zero story and then that was it for
Yeah.
5 patches, right? If they would have brought in some of the Tuliolol stuff during point 4 and point 5, I think the story would have been more fleshed out, and I think people would have been
If we would have had the ramp up that we normally had.
yes, yes,
I, you know, for as much as I love the Endwalker post patch storyline, and I love that it got, 4.5 patches to like flesh out. Um, and I know I might be in the minority in that, but like I truly really enjoyed the Endwalker patches.
Oh, I liked it.
Uh,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think not having ramp up into the next expansion, because that's always been the pattern. It's been like by point three, we're wrapping up the story of whatever the expansion was, and then we're doing two patches to set up Stormblood or Shadowbringers or Endwalker.
Hmm.
And that setup is important. And we basically
Right.
got 5 quests in a dungeon with Wook Lamont before
No,
setting
it was
into
2 hours.
Dawntrail.
It was 2 hours. That was
That's
it.
what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
uh, and so I agree with you. I think that is the nail on the head of why it felt so rushed. And the beginning of the expansion, you spend a lot of people complained that you spend like 2 hours walking around Tuliolal just kind of getting to know people. And it's
Hmm.
all like because none of that was in the pre-setup patches that normally it probably would have been.
Right. Um. So yeah, I think overall, I also okay. We're gonna transition here because we've addressed this character multiple times already, and I want to get this out of the way now because I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Well,
Wook
Clamont,
Lamata's yeah, Wook Lamata as a character, in my opinion, is not as bad as people say.
I
Okay,
agree, and we'll get into it.
okay.
Uh,
Literally, I have no problem with her. Right? People treat her as the antichrist of this game. I swear to God. Okay, and she's not that bad. Um, I think early on, it's the reason people have such a disagreement with that character is because the main character of Dawntrail isn't you.
so I've got beef on that point,
Yeah.
but I'll let you finish your thought. I'll let you finish your
No,
thought
but
before I go
a
into
lot
it.
the majority of the growth of these characters, right? Um, just because of the lead in time for what we just discussed in, right? You didn't have that time to grow Wook Lamont as a character, right? So you didn't have some of the growing pains of what the character is and what the character kind of goes through. So a lot of that stuff you witnessed during the patch, and that's why it seems kind of long, and that's why people kind of dislike her because why is she doing this? It's like it's a very much it's a shonen anime thing, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
right? She's very much a shonen anime character. Um, and I can see where you disagree with it's like, oh yeah, she's the main character of Dawntrail, and I get both sides of the point, right? Where it's like technically it doesn't really change because
Well, no,
but
I agree with you that she's the main character of Dawntrail.
oh yeah, she is the main character,
What
right?
I disagree with, I'll just get into it. Um, I disagree with the idea that we are not the main character and that is a new thing. Um, and here's what I mean when I say that. I think the only expansion where we are truly the main character of Final Fantasy XIV, and it's not even an expansion, is A Realm Reborn.
Yeah,
I
everything else
don't.
has been ensemble casts. That's
Yep.
that's pretty much it. Hmm.
But if you look at Heaven's Ward, that is oh gosh, my friends are gonna kill me for forgetting his name. Amric's story and Estinian and Ysel. If you look at Stormblood, that is Lisa's story and Hian's story. If you look at Shadowbringers, that is Graha's story and Ebbett's story. You get into Endwalker, that's probably one of the only other ones where I would argue that no, it is back to Asm and it is you who is the main character of that story. But like, we have always played a sideline supporting cast to other characters solving problems, and we come in as like the linchpin that finally like moves something to the other side, which is
Hmm.
exactly what we do in Dawntrail. We show up and we support and we move the needle to Wuklamot's side and help her find her way, the same way we did for Amric, the same way we did for Lys, the same way we did for the Crystal Exarch. Like, we have never been like the driving force of the story. And so when I saw people being like, yeah, out of nowhere, we're not the main character, I feel like that's always been the case. And I get that that's a hot take.
No, I mean, I agree with you. It's always been since, now that you mention it, since Heaven's Ward, everything has been an ensemble cast. I think in Dawntrail, it there's a slight kind of percentage of that, right? Where everything in Heaven's Ward felt like a truly ensemble cast, right? Where you had focuses on certain characters more than others, but it felt like an ensemble cast, right? Same with Stormblood. I think Stormblood is probably very similar to like going back to Dawntrail again, where a lot of the focus was on Lys for a good amount of time, right? But then you also had Heian's story, but most
You
of
had
it, you did,
Gosetsu.
yeah, Gosetsu, right? But it was ensemble cast, but it was more focused on Lys. And Shadowbringers, I felt that was truly Shadowbringers and Endwalker. I truly feel are the kind of Final Fantasy VI equivalent of an ensemble cast, right?
Yes.
Uh, mhm.
Yeah, I would agree that like it's a huge cast for those
Right.
two.
And I like to always, I throw this comparison a lot, or like a lot, right? And I've probably said this comparison a ton of times in this podcast, and we've only done 5 episodes so far. This is the sixth, where I think you know where I'm going with this. It's Shadowbringers and Endwalker, are literally the Avengers Infinity War Endgame
Yes.
of, yes, where it's an ensemble cast and it's this whole build up to the eventual finality of the arc. Um,
Sorry, my headphones are making a weird noise.
oh, um, but yeah, no, it's the kind of build up. Now, going to an ensemble cast now and going with this point, right? Another aspect that I have beef with in this expansion is the Scions themselves, right?
Yes.
Um, and this is something that has been a problem for a while now, right? And this is maybe the fault of the trust system, right? Where I forgot where it was. It was in Solution 9. We were doing it was a walk up to a dungeon, right? And I was like, wow, I wonder where the dungeon is. And guess who freaking walks through the door? It was Alfie, Stola, and like 2 other characters,
And
right?
you're like,
And I was like,
oh, a
well,
dungeon's about to happen.
yeah. So, um, this is my problem: is that the trust system. I don't want to blame the trust system 100%, right? But it has given the expectation of when you know something's going to happen, right? And it gets kind of old kind of fast.
Yeah.
Um, so in my opinion, you need to, I know some people out there says, oh, you need to kill some signs. I don't even think you need to kill them, right? You just need to say, hey, you're retired over there. You're probably not going to be in this expansion. Go do something else. Fine. And that's what they've done in previous expansions too, where, you know, um, like Heaven's Ward is probably the best example for this, right? Where,
Where Emmerich been
where,
locked in his office for ages and never
right?
shows up.
Yeah. So, or other scions in general, right? I think they did a good job with saying it was kind of in passing too, because Thancred and Urianger wasn't in post patch content at all. They were like, oh yeah, they're back over there. I was like, okay, fine, right? But so I think they have been doing slightly better on that. But during the beta expansion, that was a clear pain point for me.
Well, and I think the thing about the Scion showing up, and people talk about us stepping into more of a mentor role. If I were to say something felt different in this expansion, it is that the Scions to me came into more of a mentor role. and the Scions were kind of like how we've always been, that they show up and they support. You know, you had Urianger and Thancred like supporting uh, a different person vying for power and stuff like that. And because they weren't actively pushing the story, they were there in that supporting role. When they showed up, it was like, oh, this is so convenient that you're here in
Right.
this moment. Whereas in the past, it was all like, oh no, like Alizé's here because she's actively doing something in this area, or
Mm-hmm.
Urianger's here because like he's studying something, or Thancred is here because he's on a specific mission, and like they fit into the narrative where it was like in this one they were always just kind of there because of convenience. Like it was
Right.
like, oh, we're just gonna walk in right at the right moment before this dungeon. Whereas like we're always around because we're just doing stuff and we're following someone and we're convenient.
Right.
But when you throw that onto the Scions as well, it gives a very different feel to these characters that you're so used to seeing drive the development.
Mm-hmm.
And they almost stole the show from people who were driving the development, like Wook Lamont or Sveen, to be like, and I mean, we got Wook Lamont and we got Sveen in trusts and stuff, but it was all like, oh, yeah, why are they here? Oh, because we need a couple extra bodies for the trust system. And it's all like, realistically, we didn't. We had enough characters that it could have been like, man, no, let's just keep Koana and Wook Lamont and Sveen around at all times and have them
Right.
be trust people or things like that. Um, or just give us one or two more characters to kind of fill that spot. I mean, we had Kryl there the whole time. And I feel like, you know, Kryl like didn't really get story towards till the end, and it was
Mm-hmm.
all like, oh no, like she was set up to be a big deal, she could have been around more. um but you brought in other Scions for the sake of, like you're saying, the trust system.
Mm-hmm.
um
Yeah.
and it was
So
just, yeah, it just was kind of that was a weird out of place thing.
right. Yeah. So like for example, if you were to, because I don't remember, I think the only place Estinian really does anything is the Wild West period of that kind of area, right?
Shaolani.
Shaolani. If you take them out, the story doesn't change.
Yep. Well, and Shaolani, in my opinion, is the worst area in the expansion.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Narratively, I personally feel like Shaolani did not need to exist. uh and like I understand like where it fits in the narrative and stuff, uh and like I understand with like the inspirations they were taking, like why they put it in and what they wanted it to be. But like 95% of the Shaolani story, if you rip that out of the expansion does not change.
Right.
Like
Mm-hmm.
other than the train, everything that has happens in Shaolani did not need to happen.
Right. Since we're on Shaolani, there was one directorial um kind of thing that I'm like, really? That was what you did? And you're gonna know what this is. This is the train section, right? And they
Oh,
played
I
Smile.
thought you were
And
going to go to something else, but yeah, no, I know what you're talking about.
yes. Now there's other directorial like mishaps as well throughout the whole entire expansion too, which is kind of thinking about it now is kind of not normal compared to other expansions. So I
Yeah.
felt everything. I think it has to do with the pacing with it, but um the Smile train scene was probably the worst offender. And this is okay. I'm gonna also preface this too. The other elephant in the room is the song Smile, right? I know a lot of people hate it.
So
I don't mind it.
I don't mind Smile. I don't mind Smile. I see what they were going for. Um, you know, it's got all of the music in Dawntrail kind of has like jazz and gospel roots to it, which
Right.
is music that can be traced to the Americas in
Hmm.
terms of its founding. Um, but I think with Smile in particularly, like I understood what they were going for, and I don't dislike the song. I don't dislike the performance of the song. Like I had no issues with the song itself.
It was
Uh
played in wrong situations.
yeah, the spots it was chosen to be used, um, like I think the scene where Wook Lamont becomes uh queen and goes gets Koana and is like serve with me and everyone's cheering. I thought that was great. Like that felt like a capper to like the Tuliolal sequence before we really pushed into Solution 9. Um
Hmm.
but the train felt weird. Um and then where like I said that felt like a capper to the Tuliolal sequence, but then Solution 9, like I said before, felt kind of like a second expansion. And I
Hmm.
almost wanted a second theme song for Solution 9. And so when we got Smile at the end of the expansion in like the credits, it was like, man, like I get that this was the expansion theme, but I feel like I'm in a whole different expansion and I should have something else going
See,
right now.
I'm of the mindset that I don't think it should have played in any scenes except for the credits, right? Because I felt like that was a good place to just put it, right? Because I think what you could have done, you could have played the instrumental, and I don't think anybody would have cared, right?
Oh, and just not had the choir.
The choir, right? Now, if you played the whole song in the credits, now it's kind of like the build up to it, right? Where you're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I know this song, and then the choir sings, and you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. I know people reference it to uh a Disney song, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of there are thematical similarities between there. Um, but I truly believe the reason people dislike the song and meme on the song so much was because of that directorial mishap of placing that song there. I don't know who made that decision, but I'm going to be very critical of it because that was you're literally going into you're ramming this train into a freaking door, right?
Yeah.
And you're playing this song. Probably not the best idea,
Well, and
right?
that's like it's supposed to I
It's
feel
supposed
like
to
the
it's
song
supposed
gets
to
used when like people are coming together and like helping
it's
each
for
other and
community,
stuff.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and like it's weird cuz like thematically when everybody's working on the train and coming together, like it makes sense thematically, but I guess the thing is like that emphasizing that theme in that moment as a whole just didn't feel like the right choice. Like it's the night before battle. It's the night before, you know, you're about to take the fight to them. I don't think it's about the community coming together in that way at the moment,
right,
you know. It's not about the hey, we're solving our problems and like things are happy go lucky. It's about like the grit and the determination. And there are so many other songs they could have used in that moment. Um
right,
and yeah, I agree that's one of the biggest, if not the full biggest directorial mishap in the
right.
expansion.
And I also want to add this too because they also played that song again in 7.3, right? When Sphene became the queen elected. I don't know if they actually were like, yeah, she became
Yeah.
queen pretty much again, right? Um, and that was fine with me, okay? But when you have this one chance to make the song matter, and you have, you had multiple chances, right? Because I think the train scene to no, the train scene happened after Wooklamotte won the
Yeah.
Resolve
The
Wars or
vow to
whatever you want to
resolve.
call it.
Yeah.
The Val Resolve, yeah. Um, but that's the reason why it left so many people sour on that song. And if they didn't do it, I also don't think like I mentioned before, I don't think they should have done it with Will Clemot's speech as well. I think they should have just played instrumental. So Um, yeah,
Yeah.
that's that point. That's that's out of
Um,
the way.
well, and yeah, no, I agree. I think well, and what's interesting is I we talk about the musical mishap there, but like I there's a lot of stuff musically about Dawntrail that I actually think is the best it's ever been.
Oh, I like this
Um
music better than Endwalker. I'm gonna be honest with you.
uh the biggest one for me is the standard battle music. Like the battle music that plays when you're just running around the world and you run into an enemy. Uh I think is like the most unintrusive it's ever been. I
Mhm.
think we always make the joke. I think it's Shadowbringers that like you aggro an enemy and out of nowhere that hard rock guitar comes in and you're like, oh
Right,
crap,
yeah.
what did I do? Where like this one, it comes in and it's like that bum ba da bum ba ba da ba ba, and it's like it's fun, and you're excited every time you hear it. Uh, and like I think the dungeon music has been really good. Uh,
The raid
and
music has been
the
really
raid
good.
music has been fantastic. Like I think on the whole, and like even Smile has a song, like I said, I like the song.
It's not a bad
Um,
song, yeah.
and so like on the whole, I think musically it's been one of the best expansions. Uh, but yeah, it's just been choice of use. Um, I had a thought that I was trailing into, and now it's kind of um. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I think what's been interesting about this expansion is with like pacing and choices of like where certain things have been placed. Uh, it's the things that left a bad taste in people's mouths left such a bad taste in their mouths that like it's created this weird hyperbole echo chamber.
Mhm.
Um, and like the example I'll give is I know there were people who didn't like Wook Lamont, and like there were different reasons they didn't like her or whatnot. But like one critique that I saw so much was like, oh, Wook Lamont is this flat character with no character development. When like Wook Lamont is one of the characters with the most on the nose character development that this
Mhm.
game has ever had. um where like she is vocal at the very beginning of meeting her, where she's all like, oh, I don't think I deserve to rule, I don't think I have what it takes, but like I don't want these other people, so like I'm just like kind of meandering about to going to, no, I am the vow of resolve, I love my people, I'm ready to serve, I'm here.
Mhm.
um and really like all the characters are that way in Dawntrail. Like Dawntrail had a very tight theme of like not believing in yourself and finding your place and
Right.
believing in yourself. And that's Wook Lamont, that's Koana, that's Kryl, that's Sveen, that's um Bakul Jaja. Like that theme is through every single character of this expansion. Um but it's funny that like we let things that like with the pacing and stuff like that, where it's all like we got so disinterested that we turned it into this like, oh, absolutely nothing interesting happened in this expansion. And it's like, no, I think there were interesting things and there were interesting ideas, but we let the things that we dislike pull us out so much. And where I'm going with all of this is something we talked about last night. um I think there were a lot of people, this is both content and a story thing, that are at a fatigue point with the game.
Mhm.
Um, and I think when you're in a fatigue point, even when something new does show up, it's like you expect it to revitalize you on the game in a way,
Hmm.
and when it doesn't do that, it turns into everything sucks.
Right. And we're gonna rehash this conversation right now. So this is how this conversation went, right? Um, is that the reason why I think another reason why people have kind of a negative connotation towards this game, right? Is that there isn't enough content for me, if that makes sense,
Yes.
right? So um a lot of people, started in there was a huge uptick in population, right? From the WoW Exodus. That's generally when I came back actually too. I originally played the game for a little bit in Stormblood, played it for like maybe a couple days, and I just kind of left it at that. And then I came back, and then the rest is history, right?
The
Um,
Shadowbringers explosion.
the Shadowbringers explosion. I think I joined slightly before um after 5.0 ended. I think that's so a little bit after, maybe about 6 months after the expansion got released. So this was around, I don't know dates. Anyway, besides the point,
Yeah.
it's been a while. Um, but I feel like between that time you had a mass influx of people joining the game to the point that we have now, right? Is that you people had 4 years to catch up, right? And they found what they liked, right? And they had all this content they could do, and they enjoyed themselves, and it was fun, right? Admittedly, everything was a great time, right? We are getting to this point now where the patch cycle is a little bit is longer than it used to be, right?
Yep.
So instead of the 3 months, it's now the 4.5. It's about, yeah,
It
four and a
was,
half
yeah,
month.
it went from 4 months to 4.5. They were open. They said, hey, we're adding 2 weeks per patch cycle to give our people a break, which I'm for. I
Right.
want the devs to have that extra time, but
Hmm.
it's surprising how much 2 weeks makes a difference in that feeling.
No, right. And I think Shadowbringers was even a shorter amount of time, like in during those expansions. It
Well,
wasn't
so
until Endwalker
Shadowbringers
that,
was weird,
all because of
specifically because
COVID,
of
right?
COVID. COVID,
Right.
we
Hmm.
had that one patch that was like 8.5 months,
Right.
the
Hmm.
Eternity patch, and that
Yeah.
one. But for a lot of people, they were still new to the game, so they had stuff to
Yeah.
do during it.
Right. Yeah. So actually, Shadowbringers wasn't a good example, but um, to talk about increasing amount of times between the patches, right? Um, that is seriously, I think, where the fatigue lies, because going back to my point, there's not enough content for me in particular. And what do we mean by that is that um, there's a lot of content in this game, and you're probably going to touch on this right after I
Yep.
stop talking. Um, is that there's a lot of content in this game, but if it doesn't appeal to you, then I mean, who cares, right? Because it's like, well, I'm only looking out for me, right? I
Yep.
want to play what I want to play, um, and there's nothing for me, right?
Yeah,
So,
so I had a conversation with a friend about this, and it was this is their first true patch cycle. They came in early, I want to say early Endwalker, um, and they weren't like fully caught up during patches and stuff. Uh, but so like this is them being caught up on the patch cycle, and I remember talking to them about this upcoming patch. And they're like, yeah, I hated the live letter. Like there was nothing that like surprised me or wowed me. And as a longtime player, I hear this all the time where they're all like, oh, I need them to do something new that like excites me. And for the most part, we know about 95% of what's coming.
mhm.
They're pretty open about it. They give us roadmaps. There's a pattern. Um, and every once in a while they toss something in new. But they were just like, yeah, there's absolutely no content coming out in this patch. And I said, well, isn't there a deep dungeon? They're like, oh, well, I don't care about deep dungeons. And I'm like, well, isn't there this? And we went through like 3 or 4 things that they're like, I don't care about that thing. And I said, okay, well, there's a very different, there's a very big difference between the idea that there is no content and there is no content that you are interested in. Um, and I often say, this is where you go and you play other games. You find other things to do um, when you're not necessarily interested in what's coming out at the time. But I think, especially with a game like Final Fantasy XIV, and we talk about the social aspect, and like I experienced this expansion not super socially. For a lot of people, uh, this game has become somewhat of like a foundational piece of their life. Not just
Right.
like gaming,
Mhm.
but like their life in general. They get on, they talk to their friends. I mean, I know people who have married their significant others in the game or met their significant others through the game. And so, like, this is a thing that they do together. And when there's nothing for them to do in the game, it feels like this very personal burden of like, no, this has to be fixed because this is so important to me. Um, and the the problem when you get into that mindset is even if you are doing every piece of content that gets put out in the game, it will always take longer to develop content than it does for you to experience it.
Right.
Like if you do a fight in 20 minutes, that fight took 5 weeks for them to make.
Right.
Um, and so that idea of like, there's not enough content or there's not enough content for me at the pace that people play this game, that will always be true. Full stop. There will never be enough content if you're playing 8 hours a day and you're treating it like a
Right.
job. Like,
I want to add something to your point, right, about the social aspect too. And this was a kind of a byproduct of the COVID era as well, right? I don't know if you're aware of the term of a third place at all.
yes,
Yes. So for the people that don't know, I just kind of just Googled this real quick because I want to give a precise definition of what the third place is. It's a sociology term that refers to the social surroundings that separate the two usual social environments, which is your home, which is considered the first place, and then the workplace, which is considered your second place, right? And now with COVID happening, you have a lot of intertwining, especially with working from home, kind of, just staying at home and, so a lot of that first place, second place kind of intertwined with each other. And that third place where, you would usually be either, a bar or club or a gym or whatever you went to, right? That was kind of gone. And a lot of people replace that third place with this game as the social aspect, right? So
absolutely.
now, when you have where we are looking at right now, where people aren't into the game and the social aspect tends to fail, right? Because there's not a lot of people logging in, right? So for the people that have treated this place as a third place, and I have for a while too,
Yep,
during COVID, I think me and you both, right? Um,
absolutely.
is that you witness this collapse of this thing that you hold dear, right? And people will have visceral, rightfully so, visceral reactions to that, right? And they will start to point blame, like the development is the reason why my third place is falling apart,
Yep.
right? um and to that, there probably is some truth to that, right? The decisions that kind of made people kind of like, I'm gonna go try different things, right? And that's fine, right? People move on, a lot of people, that's normal human interactions, right? But especially for the people that stream this game, that they depend on this for livelihood, right? um it can be a very hard pill to swallow,
Yeah.
when we witness the state of this game.
Well,
So
and you bring up people who stream it and content creators, and I say this as a content creator. Um, like we talk about the disillusion of third places. Like I was someone who worked from home for the last 5 years, and felt the disillusion of like my first and my second place becoming a singular thing and not really having a third place. And that's why I started streaming. It's why I started doing content creation. Um, and uh a lot of content creators will talk about how, as COVID restrictions lightened up, like seeing people disappear from their communities and like feeling like they tried to curate and build this third space and then it kind of fell apart. Um, but particularly with 14, I think there were a lot of people who it 100% became a third place for. Um, but this discussion that like there's less people logging on and the game's dead and kind of the patch cycle, um, I think it's very like when you're in your first patch cycle, it's very easy to be like, oh, the game's dead and no one's logging on and stuff. But I've talked about this before. We can go back and find the videos from Shadowbringers and the videos from Endwalker and the videos from Stormblood of people going, this patch has nothing to do, the game is dead, where it's like there are people from Dawntrail right now who go, oh man, but like Endwalker and Shadowbringers, those were the good old days when there was so much to do and everything was bumping. And it's like, no, there were people who are in the position you are in now that felt that way in Endwalker, that felt that
Mhm.
way during Shadowbringers. And I can literally pull up the videos of people talking about Baja and how Baja was garbage and that Baja was the worst thing to ever happen to the game and that there was nothing to do because they put all their resources into Baja. I'm thinking of a specific creator right now whose name I'm not going to say, but I remember their video and I remember people being like, what are you talking about? Baja's the greatest thing ever. But like there were people who were talking about Baja the same way people are talking about um gosh, what's that field op called now? Crescent Isle or something.
Yeah, the OC,
Um,
Cold Crescent.
Occult Crescent, thank you. Uh, and it's a thing of burnout. I think we've talked about before, and it's always hard to recognize when you're burnt out with something, especially when you turn it into a third place.
Mhm.
And I watched this happen with the Genshin community. I've watched it happen with the 14 community over and over. I think gaming specifically, where it's like this digital third place, um, you watch people get disinterested and you watch people get disillusioned and like break off. Um, and as you're watching people break off, it's like you say, you try to point blame as to why it's happening. And the first
Mhm.
place you point is like the dev team rather than saying, oh, maybe people are just bored of doing the same thing every day for
Right.
4
Mhm.
years. Um, and I think with Dawntrail, we've got a lot of people who came in with the Shadowbringers and the Endwalker influx that are hitting their first patch cycle. So they've just never really experienced this. They're a little burnt out because this has been their third place for 2 to 4 years. Um,
Mhm.
and even if they're not the ones burnt out, other people around them are getting burnt out and stepping away. Um, and it's very different from your traditional third place in like the bar, for example,
Right.
is kind of the common example. And you look at like a show like How I Met Your Mother, where they go to the bar every night.
Mhm.
Where it's like the thing about a bar is the third place is you go, you get like food and drinks and like it's there's this is a weird way of saying it, but there's like a bodily function of like needing to eat that
Right.
facilitates repeated visits. Um, and when you're talking about like a video game, it's the dopamine trigger is the thing
The
that like
repeated, yeah.
is the repeated visit. Um, and that dopamine trigger comes from so many things, the game itself, the social aspect, and when it stops for people, they disappear, and burnout is a major piece of that dopamine trigger going away. And when you can't recognize that that's what's happening, and you'll have people all around you telling you that that's what's happening. um it happens constantly where you're like, dude, you're burnt out, you need to do something else. And no matter who's being the voice of reason in that moment, you're all like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Right.
This is my favorite video game. This is my favorite thing. Don't you know I have 3,000 hours in Final Fantasy 14, and sitting in Limpsa and watching bards is like my favorite thing in the world? Like,
Right.
I say this being the person who has said this before. Like,
Right. Right.
I'm not trying to target other people in this. Like, I've been in these shoes. And it's not an easy thing to realize that, like, this thing that you love, it's not that it's dying, it's not that it's like fallen off the rails, it's that, you know, everyone needs a change of scenery every once in a while.
People
You
move
know,
on. Yeah.
I played the game pretty religiously through, it would have been patch like 3.4. And then I basically skipped Stormblood. I stayed away for like 2 years. And I came back in Shadowbringers, and I played the game for like 4.5 years religiously and made some wonderful friends. You're one of them.
Right.
You know, like, but like when I was hitting burnout post Endwalker, and I was hitting burnout like during Dawntrail, because it was the second time it's happened to me with the game, it was very easy for me to go, oh, I'm burnt out. I need to take a
Yeah.
step back. I'm going to go
Mhm.
play something else. It doesn't mean I have to stop talking to my friends. Maybe we can start a podcast together and hang
Right.
out that way. Like, you know, but I don't know. Our situation posted Walker of stopping talking to people was a little bit different. But, you know, like, we're still friends, is what I'm
Right.
saying. Like,
Mhm.
even though we're not logging on and playing 14 together every day, we're still friends. We still talk. And I think for a lot of people, and I'm going to end with this, I feel like a lot of people feel like that collapse of their third space is a collapse of the friendships and a collapse of those connections.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess what I'm getting at is, especially when it's a digital third space like Final Fantasy or any other long-term game, that does not have to be the case.
Right. No, and I agree. So,
That was
are we done
probably a
talking
really
about?
long tangent on that.
Yeah. Uh, I was gonna say, are we done talking about the negative stuff, and we can talk about the positive stuff now?
Yeah, no,
Okay. Leaving
yeah,
all that stuff behind me.
we have focused a lot on the negative for this first hour. Um, but let's get into the positives. Um,
Mhm.
go for it. It sounded like you wanted to trail into something.
Okay. Right. So while the Tuliolal story wasn't the best, I really like the Solution 9 part of Dawntrail. It is probably, I would say it would probably be in terms of story arcs, I think it's one of my favorites. Just because of a lot of people. So the first part of Dawntrail was a coming of age story. Um and It was a coming of age story, and that was basically the Wuklamot kind of section of it. For Solution 9, it was the aspect of, and this is where Final Fantasy really shines, right? It's when we deal with difficult topics in life, right? And Solution Nine's topic was, how do we deal with death and how do we cope with it, right?
Yeah, grief.
Yeah, it was grief, right? And over the years, there has been loss, um for me personally, right? So when my favorite place kind of showed up, and my favorite area, and probably the whole entire game, is Living Memory, honestly. um so the scene with Graha Tia, and I think this is the most I've ever remembered, in this expansion. That is probably the most memorable place for me, is Living Memory. The section where you are going on the gondola ride with Graha Tia,
Yeah.
right? And this is the where they spent most of Jonathan Bailey's budget on this game for for this section. Is he was talking about, if you were to go back and, would you talk to this person again? Like, how would you handle this situation? Right. And, you think back and you're like, yeah, how would I handle the situation? And it's a very, I think to me, it's one of the most beautiful scenes that this game has presented so far. Right.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot, right? I would say it's probably top five. I would probably rank it a little bit lower. But that scene to me was a brilliant scene and a well written scene, right? When you're comparing it to all the everything else that has happened before, right, in this expansion, right? Because there are some really well written scenes in this expansion,
Yeah.
and it happened to be kind of in the Solution 9 area, right, in the Solution 9 arc in Living Memory, um, and the scene where you have Kryl with her parents, right? I think to me that was a pretty like for me it was a pretty impactful scene where it's like, you're watching this character meet their parents for the first time, right? And kind of grow up and kind of you see them going back to like a childlike state in a way, right?
Yeah.
Um and you
Graha
have
showing up with the giant like ice cream cone or whatever it was, like a shaved ice, and
right,
just
yeah.
being silly.
And it was moments like this where this is what's like this is the Final Fantasy 14 that I've known to kind of like and love, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It was these heartwarming scenes where we're talking about these very hard topics about just life in general, just very difficult topics, right? Where I think it hit at least a spot for me, right? I was very disappointed to see Living Memory kind of shut down, right? Because I thought it was a beautiful area, and 7.3 you turned it back on, and that was fantastic, right?
Yeah.
Um, I will also talk about. Actually, before we go into any other stuff, I wanted to you to kind of touch on if you what you feel about what I discussed so far, like Living Memory and
Yeah.
stuff
I
like that.
mean,
Yeah.
so I adored Living Memory, and I adored I think the interesting thing um is when we talk about themes of a game and stories and how they affect us, I I am a big proponent of stories will hit you differently at different points of your life. You
Hmm.
know, you mentioned that you had recently had some stuff happen that made Living Memory feel so impactful for you. Um, this is kind of not talking about 14, but like I recently played Final Fantasy 13 for the first time last year,
Hmm.
and it's like now my favorite Final Fantasy, that trilogy. And I know for a fact if I would have played that game as a teenager, I would not have gotten it. I would not have
Hmm.
understood what it was trying to say. Um, but being at the spot I was in my life, I was like ready for it. And I think with the themes Dawntrail took on, um, like I had friends who were all like, Living Memory felt so hollow and pointless. Like I had friends who
Hmm.
who were all like what would be the point of talking to people who are already dead?
Hmm.
And like in my mind, I was all like, tell me you've never lost anybody without telling me you've ever lost anybody. Uh like um I like this past year I lost my grandpa and my grandma on my dad's side.
Hmm.
Uh and just some of the discussions they have around that idea, uh like it's a beautiful thought, um but it's also this idea of like not even just the idea of being able to talk to those people, but I think the themes of, coming to terms with the loss and
Hmm.
being able to remember people and being able to have a smile on your face when you think about someone. um you talked about the Graha scene. For me, it was the stuff with Aaron Val and his
Oh
mom.
yeah. Hmm.
Like that stuff, uh, where she was the one who was all like, I've already processed this. I already know
Right.
what's going on. And her being like, you're gonna be okay without me. Like,
Hmm.
and her telling Aaron Val, like, uh like, this is gonna be fine. Um and that's not an experience a lot of us get to have.
Right.
Uh but it's, I think it's the end result of that experience is something that we all hope we can get to, of this moment of like realizing we're going to be okay without those people,
Hmm.
and truly processing those moments, uh is something that, like, I think is a universal life experience that not everyone has had to go through yet, um
Hmm.
or maybe in the process of going through it and hasn't fully processed, and so they miss that message. um and I think it's an interesting thing about stories overall, is like, is just, there's something that in your life can hit you at the right time or the wrong time, and if it's not the right time for you, you can look at a story and just be like, I do not understand
Hmm.
why people gravitated to this. And it's like, if but when something is targeted like that and you do need to hear it and it is the right time for you, like
It
a
hits different.
truck, man, like a
Yeah, it hits
truck.
different.
And I
Um,
I think Dawntrail, like, especially the Solution 9 stuff and the Alexandria stuff, for me, um timing wise, was pretty good.
right. Hmm. And you bring up a good point. People take different aspects of the story differently. It's certain points of time. Um, so another thing I really liked, and this comes actually in 7.3, is the I can tell they were taking the criticisms you know of the game design, quest design aspect of it, right? Um, and I just remember this now because we were talking about this last night. Is 7.3. Um, Mostly because we were playing the new dungeon.
Yeah.
But the escape room was very entertaining to me in patch
Oh,
7.3.
the lab, where it's
The
all
lab,
like,
the
oh, you
escape,
got to figure out how to activate this little thing, and you open up the locker, and it's a bunch of pictures of Calyx, and you're all like, we're just gonna close that and not mention it to anyone else.
right. So, mind you, as a skipper, you'll probably hate this section, right? As someone, if you're skipping through this, you'll probably very much dislike this, right? But if you're playing through the story, um, I thought it was very clever in the way that it was trying to present something different. And you can tell throughout this whole entire expansion, the point of this expansion was just let's try something different,
Yeah.
right? Um, and this is the one of the decisions that they made, which actually hit. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying to Square Enix, if you're listening, this does not mean you need to put an escape room every single, you know, couple levels, okay? But the thought of going through this and making something different, um, was entertaining to me. I felt it was a good change of pace, right? Um, and then there's other battle content that I obviously liked. Um, the raids I thought was great. I mentioned M2 was one of my favorite fights in this patch. Um, I think the raids overall were good. Um, I'm gonna be honest though, when we were talking about Final Fantasy 11. Now, so okay, this is an interesting topic here, of things hitting you at different times, right?
Yeah.
Um, I did not experience Final Fantasy 11, so I did not get anything out of out of the raids, right? Um, I thought they were cool. Thought the mechanics are cool. I'm gonna be honest with you, I couldn't care less, right? Um, but when we were talking about some of the, I just recently played FF9 while we were playing this expansion, right? Um, and the latest dungeon, the Meso Terminal, you're going through the dungeon, right? Or even the last dungeon when you see the stairs that you remember in Final Fantasy 9
Yep.
of the castle, right? The stairs. And then in the Meso Terminal, that last area, the kind of bar area that they had, right? Was it the bar? I think it was the bar when you hit the area right before the final boss.
Yeah.
I think it was the bar in Final Fantasy 9. So those stuff, I think they did a great job of kind of, you know, throwing homage to Final Fantasy
So
9. So
what's really interesting, um, this is a thing about Final Fantasy 14 is it does this thing where like it throws in references to other Final Fantasy games that you don't have to have played the Final Fantasy game to appreciate them. Like they
mhm,
wrap it in. Um, but if you have, you appreciate them so much more. Uh, but what's interesting is I have a friend who she's played a ton of them, and she's always said that same sentiment. But Dawntrail for her uh, was actually really weird, and she wanted the connections to be stronger
mhm,
because like nine is one that she really enjoys. Uh, and it's interesting to see like if it is like your favorite Final Fantasy and it means something to you, that it's all like it almost becomes this weird bastardization of your favorite
right,
game to see them use it so loosely. uh but like Otis is an example of where like Otis was clearly Steiner.
right.
Like that it felt so obvious, but like they chose not to call him Steiner, and it was
Mhm,
kind of this odd thing. um the Alexandrian castle being there, and it was all like, oh no, this is like very clearly FF9, but they are refusing to acknowledge that it is just straight up FF9.
right,
um and like Sven's Till Alexandros, and it's all like, okay, well, so how many generations removed from Garnet is this? Like,
right. Yeah.
give us some numbers. And like there were people that were like super frustrated with it. And I haven't played a ton of 11 either, but like I know people who did play 11 that are like watching this raid series and be like, holy crap, that's this enemy, holy crap, that's this enemy, and like they are so into it. um
Mhm,
and it's all like, oh, what's funny about the 11 collab is like it almost feels like they went at it with the intention of, no, you really did have to play 11 to get this. Like it's going to be fun mechanically, but story is going to go whoosh right over your
yeah.
head. um Even though the story so far has been like somewhat interesting, it's not interesting on the level of like Endwalker's the 12 raids
Mhm,
by any means. And I also kind of feel that way about the Evil East Chronicles in Stormblood, where it was like,
mhm,
if you're a tactics fan, that is infinitely more interesting than just the standard FF14 fan. Um,
mhm,
but yeah, like the references to nine, like the Necron fight for me, because nine was like my favorite Final Fantasy for such a long time. Like
right.
when he's summoning him and you first hear, this is actually, I have beef with the Final Fantasy community over this because they don't know. They don't know. Um, if you find the trial music on YouTube, it starts right as you go into the trial. Like they have it like from the trial load screen basically. And if you go listen to the original track from FF9, the like wails of despair and that like eerie music is like the first 45 seconds of that track. And it's like really important to like set the tone of Necron. And everyone who uploads the trial music from 14 cuts that part out. And I'm all like, no, it was so beautifully done because it was just like in FF9. He's getting summoned and the hands are coming up and you're hearing this eerie music. Uh, and I'm just over here like, man, you guys need to include that. Like, I don't know how you've got to do it. I don't know if you've got to go cut it from the cutscene and then edit it in, but I need you to put that in your music. Uh, but yeah, like the Necron stuff was so good. Uh, Even in the fact that it was like kind of Deus Ex Machina ish, the same way it was in 9. Like he just kind of shows up out of nowhere. Um, but gosh, I feel like I'm ranting at this point. Um,
No, you're good. So, is there anything else besides? Okay, now that we're on to you, was there anything else besides the Necron fight that you found was like that was great in this
um,
expansion?
so I really think all the dungeons were great, and I mean we talked about this and like the battle
Hmm.
content being creative. Uh, so I will turn around and I'll say I I really enjoyed the Tuliol section. And I know I'm in the minority of this, but I talk about stories hitting when you need to hear them. Um, I think a big piece, and like I don't want to get political about this. I don't want this to come off as political, but I feel like it's going to, so that's why I'm saying this. The Tuliol section is, if I were to boil it down, is about getting to know your neighbors. Like
Right.
it's very much so about understanding cultures and understanding your community. Um,
Hmm.
and you know, we were talking about like the loss of like third places and stuff like that. And something I have personally felt in my life recently is a strong desire to connect with my community. And I've been feeling this for the last couple of years, is like this
Hmm.
lack of community in my life. Whether that be through streaming, whether that be through like the games I play. Um, and part of that was because I was working from home. Part of that was because of like what COVID did to us as a society. Um,
Right.
and for me, watching this story unfold and being like, oh no, if I get out there and I try and
Right.
like I be the Wookiee and I go out and decide to like know who the people around me are, um, and it made me start visiting my family a lot more. It made me start
Hmm.
seeing my brothers more often and going down. And like I was, because I was streaming and doing other things, I was in this phase where I used to see my brother like once a week, like my best friend. uh
Hmm.
and I went into this mode where I was seeing him like once every 2 months. And like I remember finishing Dawntrail and Miss Q and going, man, I'm gonna go see my brother tomorrow. Like between the
Hmm.
Solution 9 stuff, between the Tuliolov stuff. And I mean, I go over there like once a week now. And it's only a 45-minute drive. It's not like the biggest trek in the world to see my family.
Hmm.
Um, but like for me, the Tuliolov story of like building community and like, you know, having the confidence to just go out and talk to someone really hit for me in a way that like I think is ironic, as we were talking about all like the disillusion of third places and people being burnt out with the game, and like this message of like, no, go out and talk to somebody about this.
Right.
Like, um, but I think for me it was a right time, right place kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, but I think I think honestly a lot of that section, depending on where people are at in their life, and I know it's a whole thing to replay a game like 14, but I think if people are in the right mindset, I think if they knew Game Plus Tuliolol, uh,
Hmm.
I think there's something to be said for the story that was trying to be told. Um, so I actually really enjoyed Tuliolol. Um, uh, the other thing I will say that I liked, and this will branch into the next discussion, I guess. Um, I really like the expanded. Uh, I don't know what I want to call it. The Asm mythos
Yeah,
the
sure.
ancients mythos of like the key of the interdimensional travel,
Right.
which like when you stare at it and like they talk about like the goblet being something just to like enhance it, but realistically it's a little aetherite. It looks like a little ancient aetherite.
Hmm.
um and this idea that like Asm was probably traveling shards at some point or using that to teleport around the source or something.
Hmm.
um and the Asians showing back up at the very end.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
I am I am stoked, not necessarily because that's the direction they chose to go, but I am stoked to see that they are saying, "Hey, we're telling another multi-expansion story."
Right.
Cuz I
Hmm.
didn't know post Endwalker if they were going to go, "Okay, we're truly doing just like expansions now. These are
Hmm.
unconnected stories that are just going to be little one-offs," which is what Tuliolal felt like at first, that it was like, "Oh, this is going to be a one-off, not tied to anything," and then Solution 9 kind of brought it back around. Um, because I think there were a lot of people that were saying, "Oh, you can just skip to Dawntrail and just start at Dawntrail if you want. It's going to be a whole new story. You're not going to need context from the previous stuff." And I think as you got further in, you were all like, "Oh no, that's not true. That's not true at all." Like,
Right. And something to add, I see, I had a different thought that you did because I knew this is what they were trying to do, right? Because I knew they were trying to start from scratch again, pretty
yeah,
much, right? And you kind of have to, right? And you kind of have to. There's so much more to explore, and I kind of knew this was going to be another three expansion ordeal. This is what I kind of glimpsed at from watching the live letters and the interviews. That
yeah,
there's like, okay, they're probably planning on doing another three expansions and then figuring out where that goes, right?
yeah,
Like I was mentioning before, there was a lot of things that they threw at the wall. While most of them didn't stick, right? There was a lot of things that they tried, and they're like, this is where we need to go now, right?
yeah,
This is the So this is why I feel like this expansion was very important for the growth of the game overall, right? Because this is the expansion that they had to find which direction they had to go in for the next two or three expansions that we have. Um Thematically, story wise, and mechanic wise, right? Because
yeah.
um this is a necessary, and this happens a lot with games. This was a necessary step. You can't always be at the top.
Yep.
If that makes sense, right? You have to get knocked down a peg at times in order to fully regain that top spot, or having a great story or whatever you want to call it, right? um but yeah, so the Asians, I'm going to be honest with you, I kind of wish they didn't show it yet. I kind of wish they didn't introduce Asians this soon, because I feel like, in a way, this was, and I know this is probably isn't the reason why, but I feel like this was kind of a reactionary thing to people disliking the story, right? And they're like, you know
Mm,
what people liked? Asians, right? So I feel like, and I'm sure this wasn't the intention,
yeah.
right? But there's a thought in the back of my mind. It was like, did they do that as a break glass in case of emergency kind of thing? Or you're like, but I know that that wasn't the intention, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
Well, and I'll say
but
this. I think if it was a break glass in case of emergency thing, it wouldn't have been a random piece of like an Asian cloak that we met recognized from behind. I
right.
think it would have been Emmett Selk, like, or like a very clear shard of Emmett Selk or something, and maybe he actually was Sundered. Like, I think it would have been a little more overt,
Uh-huh.
um, uh, or on the nose. Am I using overt right there? I feel like I'm using overt
I don't
incorrectly.
know. We got to look it up. And
We
anyway,
gotta look.
besides the
Is overt like direct or is it not direct? I don't know. But I get what you're saying. I actually think now was a good time to show it because we're wrapping up
Mhm.
uh Dawn Trail. I think for me, it's going to be very much about what happens in the next two patches. Like,
Hmm.
if in the next two patches, Ascians start showing up willy nilly, and it's all like, oh, we're going into a major conflict in the next expansion, I will agree with you. I'll be like, no, this was too soon. But if it's like, oh, we know Ascians are back, and then the next two patches are just, oh no, we're just setting up the next expansion. You have no idea. And just in the back of your head, this whole time, you're like, wait, but where are the freaking Ascians? Like,
Right.
to me, that's good. That's like giving you something to anticipate.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it 100% depends on how the next two patches get handled and the setup
Hmm.
to what I assume is the Maricidia expansion. That's where I think we're going next.
Hmm.
Um, and I I think Maricidia is going to be a very similar setup where we're going to have half of it in Maricidia and then half of it in some shard like Solution 9. I think that's going to become a recurring thing where it's all like, wait, what is going on that we're seeing these fragments of shards that are not getting
Right.
rejoined for whatever reason? And I think that's going to be like our overarching, like, okay, something's happening here.
Right. And
Uh,
I think there's a this was an interesting thing that I think I said this to you 2 or 3 years ago, and I was like, "What?" We were talking a long time ago. I don't know the exact date, but we are like, "What do you?" I think the question I brought up was like, "You know what I want to see in this game? I want to see a War of Reflections
yeah,
arc of this game, right?" And I was like, "What if the main bad guy in the next couple, in the next arc, is another Shard of Azim, right?" And they're like, "Why do you get to be the one
yeah,
that is the source, right? Why is it that you get to be the main guy, basically, right?"
yeah.
Um,
So I
so
agree. I
uh-huh.
want that. I think it would be so cool to have a conversation of like somebody basically, it's the conversation Emmett had with us
Yeah.
where Emmett was all like, you're not real, bro. To me, you are not life. And like
Hmm.
us having to like prove our existence is valid. And I would love to see us get put in Emmett's position of like these shards being like, no, the source has to go because we are all tethered to you. And like, what makes you guys top dog? What makes you more real than us?
Hmm.
Um, but like it be this twisted version of like our own logic getting used against us. Um, I would love to see that story play out. Um,
Hmm.
uh, and even I think the bones are kind of there with living memory because what living memory in a sense was a fake ethereal sea. You know, we know
Hmm.
anytime someone dies, they return to the ethereal sea, which is on the source. Like even if someone on a shard dies, they go to the ethereal sea. And so it's kind of this interesting thing to see living memory and be like, "Oh no, they created a system where they can live without the source."
Hmm.
Like problems with it aside, like the aether supply and stuff like that. It was like, "No, like it kind of looks like they were trying to create independence from the source."
Hmm.
Um, and so I kind of feel like there's bones for that setup of this idea of we're going to find out something's wrong with the ethereal sea and like the weird reincarnation cycles getting messed up. And we're going to find out that it's somebody over on the 13th, the farthest away shard from us,
Right.
is doing something weird and building their own ethereal sea. And that's what these other Ascians are going for. They've gone the complete opposite of rejoining. And they're like, no, we're the source now. What gives
Right.
you the right? Like, and I
And
think
I
that would
think
just be such a cool story to explore.
I think another cool story, and I'm just thinking about this now. Um, another cool story beat, and I think this could work as an alliance raid. Is do you remember that Graha technically went back from the future to the first, and then there was like a whole time dilation thing, right?
Oh, like, yeah.
I think it would be a cool, interesting thing to see about what happens because of that, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, and because they've talked about that multiple times, because the dome was like a whole time
Right.
dilated. So they've brought up the time travel bit more than once.
Yeah. I
Um,
don't think they would probably do it in an MSQ. I think an alliance raid is probably fitting for it, right?
yeah.
Um, or a raid trial, right? I think that would be really interesting where
Well,
they go and revisit that
and
idea.
you know, it's a what I think something that's interesting about that is when Graha did the time travel, he did it with Allegan Tech. And so there is this premise of like he's definitely not the first, you know.
Mhm.
And there definitely could be this world where it's all like maybe we meet an Allegan who's all like, "Oh no, I time travel all the time.
Right, and that was the whole Alexander story, right?
I've been messing with the timeline constantly." Like, yeah, that's the whole
Like,
Alexander storyline is that he time travels. Um but so yeah, no, there's definitely potential there. To be like this guy who's all like, "Oh no, I can take you to any timeline you want.
yeah,
There's thousands of them. We've been doing this for 3,000 years." And it's all like, "What?" Um,
yeah. I think there is the reason why I say this should be an alliance raid is because if you put that in the MSQ, there's a there's a lot of stuff when you introduce time travel that can make or break it,
yeah.
if that makes sense, right?
Well,
So
and you look at Shadowbringers, you know, they introduced time travel, but also they kind of just never addressed it.
yeah,
Like he went backwards and then it's all like, "Oh no, we're going now." Like that was the setup, but like from here on out, we're just having the adventure. It wasn't like every 5 minutes, yeah, we're trying to change the timeline.
yeah,
Um, so I think you're right. It is a can of worms that's hard to play with. Um, but yeah, I think what I would probably say about Dawntrail, if I were to say like on this topic and things I like, is I feel like Dawntrail set up a lot of really great threads that can be pulled at, and I genuinely feel like I don't know where the story's going.
hmm
Whereas with post A Realm Reborn, you know, I think we were always kind of surprised at where we ended up. Like I think we didn't know we were going to the first. We didn't know how Endwalker was going to play out. We didn't, but we always knew the Asians and Zodiark were there.
they
You
were like
know,
the end game, pretty much.
like
Yeah,
we knew Zodiark was the end game, and really that was the biggest subversion of expectations in Endwalker was when Zodiark was the first trial, and we were like, well, then what's next? Like that was we always thought the moon was the final area, you know. Um, but I feel excited in that same way that I felt
yeah,
post the moon, where I was like, what's next? Like, even though like we know Asians are involved, like my mind runs wild with speculation of like, well, what is this Asian faction? They're not Zodiark people.
hmm
Like we don't know truly what's coming next, and that excites me.
right,
And I think that probably is the biggest strength of Dawntrail for me from a narrative perspective, is that somehow I think post Endwalker I was in a spot where I was like, "Okay, am I done? Am I
hmm
interested in the next 3 expansion arc if they're doing one?" And like post Dawntrail I can say, post 7.3 I can say, "No, I'm in. I'm in. I'm going to see where this goes. I'm buying the next 2 expansions."
right.
Um Purely
And
on narrative. purely on
Right.
narrative.
And I think the kind of final point I'll put to Dawntrail is that this, and I mentioned this before, this expansion was necessary for the growth of the game, right? They had to do a lot of things where they knew probably a lot of people didn't like, right? Or they knew they introduced a lot of things that they found out through this process, right? Where people didn't like, right? So this was in terms of what this expansion will mean overall towards the whole entire game going forward, this was the turning point, right? This is from this point on, there's going to be a lot of stuff where you're going to see probably a lot of change, right? Um what do I think is going to happen next? I'm not really too sure. Like we have the question of what's going to happen with um leveling. I know there's a huge discussion, right, of um people coming into this game for the first time, and it's daunting, right? It is 500 hours almost, maybe
Yep.
plus 500 hours plus to get to the point where we are at right now, right? And that's just probably story and maybe doing the required raids and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I know this specifically because I was at PAX and they were talking about, oh, I really want to try that new Monster Hunter stuff, right? I was like, yeah, it's like, but I got to do everything else first.
Yeah. You've got
And
to
I was like,
play
yeah,
Monster Hunter.
yeah. You got to do like to get to the new Monster Hunter stuff, right?
Yeah.
You have to do the prerequisite, and this is something I agree with them, is that the prerequisite for that was to be to beat Dawntrail, and that was it, right? And I was like, yeah, I can see how that's daunting, right? So I think Square will probably address that maybe next expansion of, I don't know, do you give them a free skip for the people that want to do that? I mean, you could
Yeah.
buy skips, but I mean, but that's something that WoW is even addressed, right? Um, and I think this game needs to address as well, is how do you go forward from this point on, right? So
Yeah. Well, and I think two things I want to hit on that you just said. And I know we were like saying these were final thoughts, but you talk about it being like a turning point and them trying new things. I think something to remember about this expansion and them trying new things is it's not the same crew trying new things. A lot of the writers, Soken, Yoshi P, the translators, the localizer, like a lot of those people got promoted into
mhm,
higher positions so that they could be over multiple games at a time as Creative Business Unit 3. And there is a new crew that's really at the reins of making the meat and bones of 14.
mhm,
Um, in terms of like the writing, the dungeon design, and like we saw a lot of experimentation because it was new people. Um, and there was a lot of them figuring out what didn't work, like you said. Uh, and I'm excited to see what those same people can do after some feedback, after trying a few things. And like, I think next expansion is going to be really interesting and telling to see, you know, were they able to tighten up their writing? Were they able to tighten up their design and kind of get
mhm,
their flavors in and their flavors cemented as to what they're going to do? Um, and you talk about like the 500 hours to get in and figure that out. Um, this is going to feel like a really weird tangent, but last year for the Game Awards, there was a lot of controversy about Shadow of the Erd Tree being nominated for things like Game of the Year, the Elden Ring expansion, and I thought a ton about it, and it's like it's not that I dislike the idea of like an expansion getting nominated or something like that. But I said the inherent difference with Shadow of the Erd Tree is that it is not something you can just buy and play. Like people would be like, "Oh, well, we shouldn't do sequels," but like I can just buy FF Rebirth and play it. Do I think
Hmm.
that's the recommended thing to do? No, I think you should play Remake first. But like at the end of the day, if you wanted to play Shadow of the Erd Tree, you have to play 50 hours of Elden Ring before you can access that. Like
Hmm.
you have to get to a certain point in the game. There is no skip. Um, and Final Fantasy XIV's in this weird spot where you, in theory, can buy a skip that gets you straight to Dawntrail or whatever. Um, and in theory, you can just hop into that expansion, but it's so hard narratively to
To do that,
understand
yeah.
what's going on. And even from a gameplay perspective, like we talk about it as a community all the time, that like it is so apparent when you're in a dungeon with someone who bought a skip,
Hmm.
like because they just don't know how to play their class. Um, and in like a team game, and like trust systems kind of make up for this in terms of like going through like the story. But like when you're in an end game perspective, like it sucks to be in
Right.
with people who don't know what they're doing. And so it's not as simple as just like throwing people in. And I think that's also kind of why we've seen some simplification of classes and actually being able to play them is this idea. And I don't know if there's like this world where we have some simple classes and some more complicated classes. And like on the lodestone, when you buy a skip, it says, hey, if you're skipping, you should play Summoner because it's the easiest
Right.
class to figure out. Um, but I think you're absolutely right, is that like there's this weird situation where like in theory you can bring people to the game through a skip, but like truthfully it's this weird in between of like, no, there were people who struggled in Dawntrail because they did skips and the game was too hard. And how do you
So
appeal to both?
so the comparison I'm gonna make is the island, the tutorial island in World of Warcraft that they have now. And this was introduced a long time ago,
Yeah.
where it basically teaches you about the game. It's a tutorial island, right? I don't know how this game 14 handles that aspect of it.
Have you ever
there
been in
had
Stone Sky Sea?
yes, hmm,
The
yeah,
tutorial section we have?
hmm, yeah. So I don't know to do that. But also there has been tidbits of them trying to maybe accomplish that with the codex, right? If you remember that, the little adventurer log or whatever, where it says this is what this character has done. It's like this is
Oh
what.
yeah.
So there has been that, which indicates to me that they have thought about that,
Yeah.
right? Um, where you're like, well, you could probably just read this and you're like, oh, I understand who that character is, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
You know what would be interesting to see? I know like a lot of modern day games have like a little 10-minute recap before the game actually starts. Like Rebirth has one, God of War Ragnarok had one where you can like see what happened in the prior game. It would be interesting to see Square Enix come out with like an official summary of each expansion that you could just access from the main menu and be like, here's the 10 minutes of like what happened in ARR that's like actually important to understand this
right.
story. Here's Heaven's Word. And like, really, if you're like, hey, I want to know what's going on with the narrative, you could sit down and at this point, maybe it's 50 minutes because it's 5 different
Hmm.
expansions worth, but like, it's better than, oh, hop on YouTube and watch this 15-hour video.
Right. And I think there
Do we
are.
make the videos? Is this what we need to be doing? Do we need to cancel the rest of the podcast and you and
We're
I
just
make
gonna go straight
summary
to work.
videos?
Maybe, I don't know, but I think
That'd be a fun
there is
project.
There is a solution here, though. I think, um, and I'm gonna compare this with a fan project. I don't know if you're familiar with One Pace,
Oh,
right?
love One Pace.
Yes, where they might do something similar to that, where they cut down this 500-hour game that we have so far into 50 hours somehow, right? Where there's probably some stuff you can cut out here and there, and you probably won't miss
Well,
much of the main story beat.
and
And they've done that with the Realm Reborn, right?
they've done it
So,
with A Realm Reborn, and I'm not gonna lie, I see the possibility for it. I think when they did it in Realm Reborn, they kept some things they could have gotten rid of, and they got rid of some things they shouldn't have.
mhm,
Uh, and this could be a whole separate discussion, so I don't want to get into it. But I think that is something that, like, that would worry me. Because
mhm,
like, talking about Dawntrail, for example, you know, how do you cut living memory into 10 minutes?
right, mhm,
And it's like, you talked about your favorite scene being the gondola ride. That's a 10-minute scene all of its own.
right. And I don't think you necessarily cut those parts, right? I
Yeah.
think there's a lot like there's stuff that you can take out, and I don't think it's gonna harm it too much, right? But I think, like I said, I think 50 hours wasn't inaccurate, but you understood what I
But
meant,
yeah,
right?
I get what you're
Like,
saying. And I guess what I'm saying is, who who is in charge of that summary, and do they find the same things impactful and important that we found impactful and important? And it's like, how do you cut down that story without harming it?
see, and this is the main, and rightfully so. I think the story is amazing, but this is the as an MMO, this is the biggest downfall
Yeah.
to convince people to play this MMO is
Yeah.
because of that, right? Because you want them to experience the same thing you experienced and to go through those story beats, but it's hard to sell someone to do that for 500 hours,
Yeah.
right? So,
Well, and I always tell people, this is this is why we need to not talk negatively about Realm Reborn, because I think most of us played Realm Reborn at some point, and it's what hooked us on the game. Like, if you're still playing the game and you've gone through all of it, I don't think you played Realm Reborn and then went, oh, yeah, I hated it for 80 hours, and then I got to Heaven's Word and was hooked. Like,
mhm,
I think you got a slow drip of Realm Reborn, and then Heaven's Word was really good, and and like, it just kept getting better, kind of thing. But I don't think anyone dragged themselves through 300 hours before they got to
right. Mhm,
Shadowbringers and went, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. This is what everyone needs to experience. Obviously, post doing it, you can say, oh, Shadowbringers is the greatest thing ever.
right.
But I
And that
think,
500 hours is an exaggeration, of course. I should
well,
preface
no,
that as
I don't
well,
think
right?
it is. I
I
don't
don't
think
think
it
it is.
is. I think 500 hours is probably a decent. If you're just beelining MSQ, I think it's 250.
Yeah,
Um, but like, I think we need to, rather than telling people, oh, I want you to experience Shadowbringers, drag yourself through everything else, I think we should be telling people, hey, try FF14, you're gonna love it. Full stop.
right.
Like, and
Mhm,
I think we should be selling people on, and like, if people come to us with complaints after, like, they're like, oh, I feel like the leveling's a little slow, I'm not like really vibing with ARR, that's when you start telling people, hey, it gets better. Uh hey, like, yeah, you'll start to get more ability, stuff like that. Um but I think we kind of cut ourselves off at the knees by telling people, hey, you have to drag yourself through 100 hours of garbage before you
mhm,
get to the good stuff. Like, um I think we could do a better job of selling that, like, no, the game is fun.
right.
Uh
Uh-huh.
and especially with the adjustments they've made to ARR, like, I think I went through and replayed ARR on an alt account, and it took me a week. It took me a week to get through ARR, like patches and all.
Hmm.
It's not as big of a deal as people make it. Uh, but like, I think what you're saying of like, is this hard selling point of like convincing someone to pay 500 hours because we make it a hard selling point.
Hmm.
Like, because we say, oh, like there's 500 hours of stuff you got to get through. And like the really good stuff is at the end. Like, just sell it as a whole package. Just tell people, hey, play FF14. It's awesome. Choose a class. It's a lot of fun figuring out and building your character for the first time. Like, sell people on getting to create a character
Oh,
for
and then that's where you're
three
like, don't worry,
hours.
Black Mage gets better after level 60, after level 70.
That's true. That's true. Trying to explain to someone that Black Mage gets good after a certain point, and that's with a lot of classes. But
Yeah.
um, I could see a world. I could see a world where they figure out how to cut down,
Button bloat.
not necessarily button bloat, but like, I don't know if there's a way to do the story where they say, hey, we're not going to level sync you. Like, we're going to
Hmm.
let you play ARR at level 90 and have all your buttons. And, like, maybe your actual damage is squished, but, like, maybe instead of getting one level up per dungeon, like going into level 50, it's like you hit that first dungeon and we're going to give you 10 levels. And,
Right.
like, by
And
the end of ARR, you're level 90 and, like, or level 100, and you're getting to play through every expansion with your full kit.
right. And that's interesting that you put that way because the jobs since Shadowbringers, like my rotation for Warrior has stayed relatively almost the same.
Yeah. There's been a
Right.
few jobs that have gotten major reworks each expansion, but like
Hmm.
it seems like they're trying to maintain muscle memory.
Right. Hmm. And they're just putting a slab of new paint on just renaming a skill that does almost the same exact thing. Right.
Yeah.
Um, and I think this is evident with the newer classes too, where there's not a lot of buttons. You've played Viper or Picto, there isn't not a lot compared to other classes, right?
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that they've added your 1, 2, 3 is now just one button, right? And I can see a lot of other classes following suit with that, right? Where because you have like a lot of these classes they have at 1, 2, 3, right? Especially
Yeah.
DPS classes, right? Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 5, or whatever. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um, where that now goes into a singular button. I can see. I know people aren't going to be a fan of that, right?
I
um,
I love the meme of people talking about it. It's all like the gameplay of this game is fire, and they're talking about 14, and then it shows someone hands on a keyboard and they're doing the 1, 2, 3, and it's just click, click,
right.
click, click. And it's like the gameplay is so good. And it's like that's an oversimplification. But I'm on the side of I don't care if this is one button or three buttons. Um,
Hmm.
like I still think the rotation of the skill is there, but
Yeah, it's relatively the same. Yeah. So anyway, I know we kind of went on a side tangent,
yeah,
but final thoughts, necessary step. Um, but I'm excited to see what happens next. That's all I'll say.
I agree. So uh I mentioned where the expansion was for me at the beginning. I said like it's my third favorite expansion. I think a lot of that was carried by the battle, but also I enjoyed the story. But you didn't give a proper ranking of where it sits expansion. So I'm
Um,
gonna put you on the spot right here at the end. I want to
okay,
know where
here's
it
what we're
sits for
doing.
you.
We're gonna go from the top. Okay,
Okay.
you got 1A. Oh shoot, should I do that? No. Okay, so 1 is Shadowbringers. 2 is um 2 is Endwalker. 3 is post Shadowbringers because I'm ranking them differently, right? Because I'm
Okay.
actually putting expansion the patches as its own separate entity at this point, right?
Okay.
Um, so God, so I'm gonna lose track now. Because I have to figure out where this goes to, because I'm just coming up with this on the spot, but I know it's not ranked that high. Um, so and then you have Heaven's Ward. No, actually, I put post Heaven's Ward first over Heaven's Ward, in my opinion.
Okay.
And then Heaven's Ward, right? And then you have post Endwalker, right? And then you have post Stormblood, and then you have Dawntrail.
Okay.
So this is so it's ranked 7 if you rank it that way. And
Yeah.
then there's, you can kind of guess where everything else goes in line
Yeah.
with that. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can see it. So we
Mhm.
have somewhat similar rankings. Because I view things holistically, but I put Heaven's Word below Dawntrail.
Mhm.
And for you and me, those seem to be flipped. But so yeah, I think we were pretty much in agreement that this was somewhat middle of the road, back end of the middle of the road.
Yeah.
But we're both excited for the future.
Yeah. Like I said, it's necessary. There needed to be, I'm not to be a negative Nancy, there needed to be a bad expansion. Every MMO goes through this. Every game goes through this, where you have that bad game and then the next game is just amazing. Right.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
it's like that with movies and in music and everything, where you have this one bad album and the next album's just great, right?
Yep.
Or it could be trash all the way through. Who knows?
We
So-
could be entirely wrong. Everyone who's saying like the game is dead and that this is the worst patch cycle ever, like, could be actually right this time. And we could be witnessing the downfall of 14. We'll come back to this 3 years from now, post expansion, and reevaluate this.
yeah.
But all right, everyone. Well, thank you for listening to us rant about Dawntrail and what we did and didn't like. If you enjoyed this, we've got several other episodes of the podcast already up on the channel, as well as more to come. But thanks for spending some time with us. We appreciate everyone who watches these videos, whether it's for a little bit or for a lot. And if you enjoyed this, remember to like and subscribe for more. And we'll see you next time.
Oh, before you cut it off, I have to add this because we haven't done this recently. Check out our other episodes too, because we've done at least 5 of them now, at least, right?
Yep.
So you can watch all those. All of our links to wherever we do stuff is also down in the description, which we haven't done. So I'll also
Yeah,
do
we're
that.
gonna have links in the description of. I was gonna film a separate thing for this for you to put at the end because I was thinking about it today, but we're just doing it now. We're doing it now. But and maybe this will be posted at the end of every video going forward. If you want to see UU streams or Jim's streams, that link is down in the description. If you want to see my streams, that link is down in the description. If you want to see other content, it's here on the channel. But we'll also have links to the other episodes of the podcast, stuff like that. It's all down there. It's all down there. Click the button. We're doing the YouTube thing. Do the motion, Jim. The pointing.
All right.
It's down
goodbye,
there.
everyone. See you later.